Hello, everybody. It's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdom's role-playing game and Fire in the Head Productions. Today is a Savage Kingdoms video. So I've been doing these videos, these cultural videos about the different races and cultures of Savage Kingdoms, and I haven't done one in a while. It's been like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. Kind of lost interest, and it seemed like the viewership of those were kind of going down a little bit, but I just want to get them all done just to kind of at least make an archival record of them. So yeah, thought I'd pop back in. I had to do a Korite accent earlier today for an audition, so we're going to cover Kor. So Kor is from the Savage East. Also, that would be Mulovian accent, actually, more like it. But anyway, whatever. So today is this is the book that we're in, the Savage East. Kor is one of the Eastern cultures in the Savage East. There we go, right there. There's a map of it. If you own the Savage East Kor, or not Kor rulebook, the Savage East book, the Kor rulebook is the other one that covers the West. It is on page 133 of the Gazetteer. However, wait, sorry, I told you that. We're going to start in the character creation section where Kor is, where you choose your race. So that's going to be page like 26 maybe, I'm guessing. Nope, I'm off by a couple of pages. That's going to be page 18, 16. I keep going down. Page 12. I wasn't really that close at all, actually. So page 12 in the player character race section near doing character creation. So, yeah, that's it right there. So it has a picture, an image of a gentleman, probably not really a gentleman, a man on horseback, a horse archer. And that's to represent the fact that the Korites are a horse-based culture. There's several of them in the East. Several people have commented. They're like, "Oh, you have a lot of horse cultures in the East." I'm like, "Yes, I do actually. Thank you." There's the Untillans, which we'll get to eventually because these are being done in alphabetical order, which are based kind of loosely on the Mongolians in the real world. The Korites are probably loosely based more on the Cossacks, right? The Russian horse steppes people. But a lot of those cultures kind of, eventually encountered each other and kind of mingled into each other. So they were these great steppes, horsemen cultures. Yeah, so that's why I have several of them. The other, I guess, main one would be the Urish, the people from Erland, which we'll eventually get to them as well because we're doing this in alphabetical order once again. All right, so page 12, the Korite people. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read some of the paragraphs. Strangely enough, the people of Kor may be more renowned for their failures than their victorious exploits, having been driven into the Dragon Sea or flat out destroyed by the Mulovians of the Western continent over a century ago. Western continent is Astagonia across the Dragon Sea. This all began when a powerful chieftain named Ruska came to power and, learning the ways of shipbuilding from the Volner, built a mighty fleet which traversed the Great Sea. There in lands east of Scathia and north of Mulovia, Ruska's people settled, more or less, although they had always been a restless semi-nomadic race. Right, so they're the Korites are semi-nomadic. It kind of says it right there. That first paragraph refers to a historical thing in the setting, whereas well over 100 years ago, gosh, I'm trying to remember the timeline without looking it up, maybe close to 150 years ago, the Korites, the people from Kor in the east, I'll show you in a map a little in a second, but Hassan is the eastern continent, where Kor is located, where these people sort of first developed. That's kind of in the central northwest of that continent. So eventually, the Korites, even though they're horse-based people, they started messing around with shipbuilding. Like it said, they kind of learned the ways of shipbuilding from the Volner, the people from Volnerok to the north, which are kind of a Viking-esque people. And so they mastered shipbuilding more or less and crossed the Dragon Sea, and they found these lands inhabitable between Skathia and Mulovia, which were kind of no-man lands. And oddly enough, they kind of are that way again. Excuse me, still getting over a little bit of a cold. So they settled there for quite a while, for around a century or so, 120 years, but they were making, they were raiding the Skathians and the Mulovians, so they end up kind of making kind of a mistake, kind of making enemies of both kingdoms, both cultures there. And for once, the Skathians and Mulovians, who do not get along really anymore in the current age of Savage Kingdoms, banded together to kind of overthrow the Korites. And like the paragraph said, they literally drove some of them into the sea. Um, Captured some of them and, killed some of them, obviously. It was a pretty horrible battle. Excuse me. So that's why the paragraph opens saying that the Korites in some ways are more famous for their failures, and that's not really that fair. It's just that one kind of failure, but it's kind of a big failure. And so the ones that survived just kind of literally were driven into the sea to drown. There were some ships that were on the harbor, of course, that some of them were able to flee in, and eventually a few did make it back to the Dragon Sea, but very few returned actually. And not all of Kor emptied to go settle west. Obviously, only about maybe I don't think I've ever really come up with the exact number, but maybe no more than a quarter of the Korites left Kor to go settle into New Kor, between Skathia and Mulovia, the continent of Asconia. So it's not like it was genocide. There were still plenty of Korites left in the original land. But they kind of learned their lesson. They're like, all right, so maybe we're better off over here, I suppose, whatever. And now they've kind of grown back in power, and they've kind of came back to the power level they were, possibly maybe even a little better off than they were. So kind of an interesting race or culture to choose as your character. I'll read a couple more things. Nevertheless, the barbarian Korites had many successes otherwise throughout their storied history, although their great loss against a coalition of Mulovian and Skathian forces, which literally drove many into the Bay of the Ravens, was a deep wound indeed. From the epic event, those surviving Ruskan Korites, those are the ones that settled in that went to Asconia, resettled back in the original lands of Kor. I just kind of covered all that. Adjacent to Erland, and not far from Tarnia in the old territory of the once famed Galagatsan Empire. Here, the people of Kor, much like the Urish, are a semi-nomadic horse people, relying on swift horses and other beasts of burden. The typical Korite is medium to somewhat tall in height with a sturdy frame. Most are brown-haired, though blondes and redheads are not entirely uncommon. They tend to dress in furs and leathers, usually made from wolf, bear, or yak hides, while the warriors tend to carry heavy sabers. This is where the Mulovians got the saber kind of idea. So a lot of Mulovian nobles carry the saber. It's a symbol of having defeated and overthrown the Korites. Little history note there for Mulovia. Sabers, spears, and war clubs or warhammers. They seldom make use of shields, but when they do, such devices are no greater than a round targe or wooden buckler, so they prefer smaller, round, more mobile shields. The humans of Kor often worship borrow deities. So this means borrow deity means a god or religion or faith, immortality, divinity borrowed from other cultures, such as Utar or Golotan, and even the demon god Tarax, although a few still acknowledge the old gods and earth spirits of hallowed antiquity. So Utar is kind of the chief god of the Urish. He's like a horse god, so it would make sense that the Korites kind of adopted him. God of horses supposedly created centaurs, and to a lesser extent, kind of a god of travel, since horses represent speed and traversing terrain and that sort of thing. Golotan is kind of the chief god of the Yuns or Yuntillans, and he's also kind of a horse god, but his portfolio is a little wider than that. He's also kind of a god of strength and hunting prowess. So yeah, and conquest even to a lesser degree. And then there's a bunch of, like it says, there's a bunch of little local gods, old gods, earth spirits that are probably nameless. Some of them might even be named, but they're so minor that they're not really in the book. So individual game masters are free to come up with some of those if they so choose. Okay, allowable callings for a Korite character: assassin, bard, berserker, craftsman, cultist, gladiator, healer, hunter, merchant, shaman, seer, soldier, sorcerer, thief, witch. So those are all your. Anybody new to Savage Kingdoms watching this, a calling is kind of like your class, but it's not nearly as restrictive. It's kind of like it says, a calling, something you were kind of led to do, and your character is built leaning in that direction, but you don't have to stay there. It gives you some discounts on certain talents and stuff like that. Attribute array. So these are the 6 attributes that you have in Savage Kingdoms: agility, physique, vigor, intellect, magnetism, and willpower. Korite player characters must arrange their attributes of character creation using the following guidelines. So basically there's a chart. So this is where you're crafting your character's attributes, and it's not a random roll system. You actually get to choose Although I did put an optional rule, I think, somewhere in this book that if you want to roll your attributes, you can, or if you want to do it for an NPC, but it's not really work. It's better to craft it and put the numbers where you want. So I'll just say the most favorable attributes for Korites are the is agility, vigor, and willpower. So each race and culture, each culture of the human race is usually get three attributes that's more favorable for their culture. It's just being in that culture. It's just you do this more often. That's what it represents. So again, it's agility, vigor, and willpower. So you can start with high as a +4 in those three, and no lower than a -2, and your absolute maximum over time can be up to +6 because you can advance to gain certain advancements. You gain an attribute boost. So there you go. Right. And then the other attributes, physique, intellect, and magnetism, are the lesser ones. But still, I mean, you can start with a max of +3 and those, and as low as -3. Special abilities for Korites. Plains Rider. Korite characters gain a +1 bonus to animal handling, perception, and survival skill rolls while in plains or steppes terrain. There you go. Their second special racial ability is Winter's Touch. Korites receive a +1 bonus to endurance rolls when resisting ice or cold effects, just because they're used to the. It's a little bit cold where they are. It's not like super frozen. It's kind of like upper temperate. The northern part of their lands might start getting a little bit into subarctic, but and also they spend a lot of time outdoors. Skill specialties. Korite player characters may begin with 3 skill specialties at character creation, which must be selected from below. So every human culture starts with 3 free skill specialties. So normally a skill specialty, you have to have 3 skill levels in a particular skill to choose a specialty. So these you don't even have to have any skill levels. These are just, again, represent cultural things that your people are often use or spend a lot more activity doing. Those choices are acrobatics, balance or mounted, animal handling, goats, falcons, horses, or yaks. So basically, I'm listing the broad skill, and then after that is the specialty. Brawling, grappling or punching. Endurance, resist cold or resist pain. Herbalism, healing or poisons. Specialty. Perception, sight or smell. Specialties. Performance, dancing or drums. Persuasion, bargaining or intimidation. Survival, foraging, hunting or plains. Weaponry, melee or melee weaponry, sabers, spears, war clubs, or war hammers. Range weaponry, specialties are composite short bows, javelins, or short bows. So there you go. I get to choose 3 of those. Oh, and this question has come up because I'm not sure. I think it's clear in the book, but if it's not, somebody asked me, like, okay, what if I wanted to choose, so acrobatics or balance or mounted are my options. Can I choose both? You can, actually. So yeah, you can totally do that. So, favored talents. So, favorite talents, to explain this again, I probably explain this in pretty much all these videos, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page. So, that means you pay 1 less point for that if a favorite talent falls within your race, your culture. You pay 1 point less, and if it's also a favorite talent of your calling, and it'll be listed, you would pay 1 point less there too. On rare occasion, you pay 2 points less, but it'll literally say, like the Thoraki, for example, paid 2 points less for the Trollborn talent, but it specifically says, in fact, that's one of their racial talents. So yeah. So in all other cases, it's just 1 point. So you could get 2 points off if you do calling and race, yeah. And then there's a few talents that actually give discounts to another talent that's associated with it. So there's like 3 different ways to get a favorite talent. So over time, they save you points. So that's kind of the benefit of it. And again, they represent the natural gifting or training of your people, of your culture. I won't list all of them, but favorite talents. There's the battle ones there's a pretty good bit. I would say most of them are battle. Subterfuge does a pretty good. So battle, the few ones in less a few in battle senses, bullish charge, deadly lunge, hit and run makes sense. Horseback archery, impaling thrust, mounted charge, muster the horde, running shot, shield bash, tripping attack, wolfpack tactics, and there are some others. The only favorable blood talent is Trollborn. Mystical talents that are favored: craft potion, evil eye, herbal magic, mystic tattoo. I was about to say mystic taboo, which I don't know, weirdly kind of makes sense. Mystic tattoo, totem animal, bear, horse, or wolf. And then social talents, you've got bodyguard, champion, gladiator, mercenary, nomad, saddleborn. Subterfuge, you've got dirty tactics, feigned attack, gambler, hunter, raider, slaver, trap setter. There you go. And then in the other category of talents, which is like kind of a miscellaneous category, you've got animal kinship, beast companion, horse, commanding voice, grit, intimidating physique, light sleeper, night-sighted, and tireless. Right. Favored weaknesses. These are if you choose weaknesses that's favored within your cult, meaning that your people tend more often to have these type of weaknesses. And you get an extra point. So weaknesses give you bonus points at character creation to add towards talents or skills. Favored weaknesses for Korites: disfigured, heretic, infamous, oathbound to chieftain or mate, obsession with horses or wanderlust, and phobia, enclosed spaces or the sea. There you go, favorite weaknesses. You could take other. It doesn't mean you can't take any other weaknesses. It's just if you choose a favorite one, you get a bonus point. Starting languages. Korite is your native tongue, a language with a crude semi-written system. You also know one of the following if your intellect is -1 or better, which means you're just below, a little below intellect, average intellect, but not that much below. Urish, Volner, Yuntilin, Zaramis, or Dwergar. So those are you get to choose one of those as your bonus language. If you have at least 2 skill levels in language, then you get to choose another language. That's from the language skill, though. Has nothing really to do with your race or culture, but I just want to throw that out there. Sample names of Korites. You have Bors, Goris, Ivan or Ivan, Olaf, Rygar or Ryger, Korvac, Uruska, which is the famous guy. Those are male names. Bora, Goria, Natalia, Korova, Kirki, Nikla, and Olga are female names typically. Most Korites use son of and daughter of in designations, although some might utilize a clan name as well, such as Borov, Vanak, Roskomir, or Helgrad. So usually they are Goris, son of Korova, but occasionally you might have, I am Olga of the Borov clan, or the Helgrad clan or something like that. So there you go. Cultural item. Typo. It says, why Korite? Yakorite. Korite characters may begin play with 1 or 2 by spending a luck point of the following cultural items in addition to the more normal gear they might purchase. So, meaning that you get to choose one of the following items. I'll just kind of go through them really quick. But if you spend a luck point, like, and they are permanently spent in Savage Kingdoms, you can start with 2 items. All right, so your choices are a shaggy Korite pony, an aging riding horse, rusty saber once belonging to a clan champion. You could try to if succeed in a crafting roll and make it of exceptional quality. So it's possibly exceptional quality if you can fix it up. Those are fun things to start with. Broken lance, once belonging to a great rival. That's another one you can fix with a crafting skill to make better. Preserved head or skull of a great enemy. +1 to intimidation rolls when shown. Captured banner of an Urish, Volner, or Yuntilin captain or chieftain. You gain +1 to renown for that. Bone-handled cold iron knife usually deals additional damage to fey creatures. Right, cold iron usually, almost always does at least uncomfortable to fey. 3 silver-plated arrowheads typically does extra damage to certain supernatural creatures. Yep, there you go. Exceptional quality leather cloak trimmed in bear or wolf fur. It grants you a +1 to endurance rolls to resist ice, cold/ice effects when worn. And yes, that would stack. If you were to choose that, it would stack with your Winter's Touch racial ability. You'd have +2 right there. So awesome. Okay, that's everything from the character creation section for the Korites on page 12 and 13 of the Savage East. So now I'm going to go where I started the video, even though we stayed there for like 2 seconds. Page 133, I think it was. Yes, 133. So now I'm back here, everyone. Anybody following along at home? Forbidden Lands, and then you got Kor. So Forbidden Lands I will probably come back and pick up much later once I'm done with all the sort of civilized cultures. So, just to go over a few things, we're at not even quite at 20 minutes, so we're doing actually pretty good time. These videos are typically 35 minutes, sometimes 40, but this one hopefully will be a little bit shorter and neater and tighter, that sort of thing. All right, so you saw a map of Kor. Korova, or Korova, I think it's Korova, I think it's Korova, is the capital, sort of. And I say sort of because Kor is one of those, we refer to it as a kingdom, sort of, but that's just kind of a loose terminology. A realm, a territory is probably more, because it's mostly a bunch of clans. So Kor is not ruled, if I recall. I'm going to look up my own stuff here. Not overruled by any great chieftain or king right now. It's mostly led by various clans. However, Ruska III, called Swifthorse, so Ruska Swifthorse, is a potent leader of one of the main Korite clans, the Korsas. So the Korsa is named after his great-great-grandfather. He and most of his clan can be found in or around the city of Korova. So there we go. That's what I kind of thought there. So Yulgazan is a famed wise woman and sorceress residing in the half-wilds of northern Kor, an elder occasionally sought out by clan lords and others seeking tutelage or advice. Oltar the Red is a rising clan chieftain, leader of the White Crow clan. I think that they're mostly in the south. So it seems to be the two big clans, and there's actually several great clans considered great clans, but the two, I guess, biggest ones from what I take from that and what I remember, any other lore that I have in my head that I ever written down, Ruska the Third and Oltar the Red are kind of the most powerful. Yolga Zahn, the lady I just mentioned, is not really she's like an old wise woman and sorceress, probably a witch actually, and so yeah, I read from the important characters section on page 134 in the Korite Gazetteer. So let's see, what was it's a Korva. You got Port Garnia. Port Garnia is on a lake on the Galador River. And the reason is you might think those names don't sound particularly Korite, quote unquote. In other words, kind of vaguely Slavic. Because they were names of the Galagot. These are leftover places of the Galagotsan Empire, which is the Empire of the Four Crowns, this big, huge empire that existed. I'm developing Red Sun right now. My next role-playing game is, if I publish, I'm not real sure if I will, but and it's a predecessor. It goes 3,000, or actually 2,500 years before the Savage Kingdom's timeline, and it's really cool because Galagotsan Empire was just starting to rise and kind of trying to develop all that. It's been really cool. But basically, so in Savage Kingdoms, now in Kor, Galagotsan Empire has fallen. It's fallen about 150, or maybe I think it's been about 200 years. Yeah, closer to 200 years ago. Sorry, that has fallen. So Port Garnia is an old Galagotsan city that's remained. It's a big port city on this big lake, and the Galador River kind of runs into it. Also on the map here it says Galamir. Galamir is another leftover half-ruined but rebuilt city that the Korites rebuilt. And at one point it was kind of like shared, like Tarnia took it over, and there was a little bit of war between Tarnia and Kor, mostly skirmishing back and forth on who was claiming control of the city. So not really all out war, but. And then also on the map is the ruins of Galagotsan itself. So the Galagotsan Empire is named after this giant city called Galagotsan, or Galagotsan City, and it's also kind of in the eastern reaches of Kor, really on just kind of the border, because there's a river there that the Korites really kind of sort of end their territory. Occasionally, a semi-nomadic clan may wander over there, but it would be very disputed land. All right, so religion-wise, you've got the Korites. I think I mentioned this. They accept outsider deities pretty often. Golatan and Utar. Let's see, even Korsa, the most popular. Yeah, and occasionally, like a cult will spring up worshiping Korsa, the most famous chieftain who fathered Ruska. It's sort of considered an ancestral demigod spirit. The cult of Tarax, less than a century ago, came in. This sort of the three-eyed toad demon god. We've had a lot of fun with that deity, and there's even a creature called a spawn of Tarax, which is this giant three-headed frog demon thing with a long tongue that can. Anyway, so that cult's kind of moved through and swept some Korite people into it as well. That creature's claim to fame is culling the weak, So he's a god of disease, and so you would think, why would you worship a god of disease, right? And most people wouldn't, but uh, he does stand for culling the weak. He believes that disease, this deity supposedly, or his worshippers believe that this disease rids the weak from the world, and so you're kind of culling the weak or separating the chaff from the wheat, that sort of thing, making in the end your gene pool, I guess, stronger, right? So there's kind of a Thanosian sort of philosophy in there, I guess, somewhere as well. So, right. Geography. Kor is mostly, predominantly plains, both open and occasionally wooded. Marshland is fairly prevalent as well, especially in the middle of Kor. There's a pretty large region called the Black Marshes. The Galador River provides the oft-disputed border between Kor and Erland, while the infamous Blood River marks the southern boundary. That's the big massive river to the south, like Mississippi, Amazon sort of sized river. There are some forests in the north, a mix of pine and hardwood, as well as minor hills and crags. There you go. Major cities and settlements. Korites are not big city builders because they are. Reason I say semi-nomadic instead of nomadic is because they rarely are on the move all the time. So they're typically they might stay a year or two, maybe even 5, depending on the resources and safety and all that kind of usual nomadic considerations. But yeah, so however, Korova is considered the capital of Kor. I think I mentioned this earlier. A trade city where both Korsa and his son Ruska once ruled, and a place where the clans often gather for council, competition, and alliance making. So they will gather there. In fact, there used to be, I think there still is, like once a year, the clan chieftains early and most of the clan would try to meet there. It's kind of a rude, sort of crude sort of form of council. It usually went peacefully, but sometimes there was treachery and stuff, and that's why it doesn't always happen as much anymore. But they still try to do it whenever they can. And then I talked about Galamir, hotly contested city with Turnia. The city was sieged, however, only a decade ago. And blah, 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 blah. Port Garnia is occasionally threatened by Korite marauders, but the walls of this Turnian city. Okay, so I kind of misspoke. Port Garnia is actually currently controlled by Turnia, but it is raided pretty often by the Korites. But it has pretty high and thick walls, is the problem. And then there's the ruins of Calagonza City. Yeah, that I mentioned already. So, moving on, Denizens, flora and fauna. Um, let's see. All right. So, apart from the Korites themselves, occasionally you might find Zaramese raiders or even slavers forging up across the Blood River trying to take slaves into Korite territory on occasion. Occasionally, Azeri tribesmen will wander up as well. They're usually not slavers, but sometimes they're kind of bandit-like. Let's see. Hobgoblin warbands were once troublesome here and still are on occasion. Sometimes trolls and worse come down from the north. A terrible dragon once dwelt in this region as well, hunting the plains and accepting tribute from the local clans. Some say, in fact, that it's the spawn of the once mighty drake called Orthrax. Oh yes, Orthrax, a shadow dragon. Makes its lair somewhere in the expensive ruins of Galagatza City. Yeah, that was a rare type of dragon in Savage Kingdom. Most Savage Kingdom's dragons, and they're really rare in this day and age, as you probably know. There's possibly only about 7 or 8 remaining in the entire world. Little secret, there's a few more than that. But 3 of which, only 2 or 3 left, are considered elder dragons, such as Volnathrax and Terengethrian, or Gethrax. But Orthrax was considered this rare type of dragon called a shadow dragon, not because he is like a shadow dragon from Dungeons and Dragons particularly, but his scales are more black, which was kind of a rare thing, and so he was like black as a shadow, and that's why he was called. So an Orthrax, if I recall in what little dragon speech language I came up with, actually means mighty shadow. So interesting little thing there. All right, the food and drink the people of Kor. I won't go too much in this detail. The people of Kor adopted a drink from the Mulovian, Slavka, although it is often referred to in Korite as Rusva. Light, I actually forgot about that detail. Light and medium ales are enjoyed as well, some of it brewed from unusual ingredients, and even a crude form of berry wine is made and imbibed. The staple foods of the Korites are beef and pork, although fowl, quail, and pheasant are fairly common too. Wild potatoes, onions, cabbage, corn, and various forms of bread are often used to round out their diet. The folk here are all semi-nomadic, so they tend to hunt and gather more than engage in agriculture. Important characters, I actually already went through that. Heraldry and symbology. So the Korites use very little formal heraldry, as you might imagine. Many chieftains, however, champions, and even renowned priests and horse tamers often make use of banners, usually made of leather or horsehide. So they will, crude sort of Dark Ages, early Middle Ages form of heraldry, so to speak. Ruska swift horse flies a black horse on a field of brown or gold, while Ultar the Red is known to prefer the symbol of a red crow on a field of bone white. Other devices are often used from time to time by various individuals of renown, usually involving wolves, boars, bears, crows, or horses. All right, so let's see, enemies and allies. I won't go into too much detail here. So currently, Tarnia has been a foe, a rival before, as Erland, and the Galagans against an empire was despised up until its downfall 150 years ago. I said it was 200 years, so it's more like 150 years ago, due to its heavy taxation and occasional enslavement of many Korites. At present, the Zarmese Empire across the Blood River is likely the most suspicious and despised enemy, and not so ancient memory of the Korites' near genocide in the West at the hands of Mulovian and Skathian cannot be easily forgotten, which I mentioned earlier. So as you can see, the Korites have had a fair share of enemies through the years, and not a whole lot of allies. They're very, except for their within themselves, they're very resilient, very independent. Primary imports. The Korites often import ale, wine, precious gems, gold, silver, spices, and exotic herbs from foreign traders, merchants who are, more often than not, quite daring to deal with these savage horse people in the first place. Most outland traders are from Azyria, Tawny, and occasionally Erland, Volnarok, and even Durtharon. Durtharon is a dwarven or Dwargar realm to the north, up in the Valdrak Mountains. Primary experts. Korite traders exist, although they are difficult to distinguish from a raiding party, especially quite often they are one and the same. They will generally export leathers, furs, semi-precious gems, copper, tin, rare herbs, and semi-wild horses. Coinage and currency. Just really quick. So, Kor circulates foreign coins because usually it depends on the actual metal value. They don't really care where the coin is minted as long as the actual metal is worth something. Most of which come from Tarnia, Azyria, and Zaramad, as well as ancient Galagadson coinage that is likely worth more than most Korites assume, at least the scholars. Let's see. They do, however, print or mint a copper coin, or did for a while, in the honor of Ruska the First, worth about the same as most other bronze copper coins in today's realm and today's society, and also a Kora. A Kora means crow. By the way, Kor basically means crow, like the crow people. A Kora, or no, was it Raven? I think Kora is crow. I came up with, and Kor is Raven, actually. Otherwise, most Korite clans still prefer trade and barter or occasional service oaths. In other words, they will provide a service for something, and they make an oath, a promise to do it, and you'd bet to do it. And most of them will, right? Because it's too easy to be retaliated upon in these cultures. Climate and weather. Kor is generally quite temperate, with some light snow and icy rains in winter, and some balmy heat in the high summer. Autumn is cool and dry. Blah blah blah. Spring is fairly warm and rainy. Because it is fairly open plains, you get cyclones occasionally that the locals call storm demons. Are not uncommon in late summer and fairly early fall. Spring and early winter, the rivers can sometimes fill to flooding, but it is not an altogether common occurrence. All right, I'll just kind of end with common cultures. I kind of like these things and common sayings. There's a whole paragraph of them, and again, I'm on page one. I'm now on page 134. So this kind of big paragraph right there. So these are kind of fun when I was world building and designing the game and stuff. I'll just go through a few because they're always kind of, I guess entertaining to some degree. A Korite warrior always names his horse or horses and will sleep in the saddle if necessary, meaning that they very much care for their horses. They're almost like they're part of the family, basically. So they will pretty much always name their horses instead of like, hey, that's my horse. When a deformed colt is born, it is slain instantly by axe or spear, and some shamans will keep a preserved hoof as an amulet or talisman. That's kind of the sad part. But again, it's a culling of the week. It's like we can't really take care of it, but they do at least preserve its hoof as kind of an amulet or talisman. When a horse is killed in battle, it is given nearly the same honor as its rider master. Many Korite tribes emulate horses in their behavior or thought patterns, and they are featured prominently in most heraldry. Korites tend to have both a great fear and great fascination of dragons. Similarly, many Korites have a morbid fascination with the ruined cities of fallen Galagatsan, especially the capital. In ancient times, a Korite man would steal away his chosen bride on horseback. This custom still exists today to some degree. Most single combats are fought on horseback, often using spears, and therefore cruelly similar to Eridorian or Tarnian jousts. Young Korite males coming of age were once sent away to bring back a stolen horse or weapon from a foreign clan or kingdom, a rite that is still employed occasionally today. In elder times, Korite shaman witches would spend the night with a stallion, hoping to produce a centaur. Creepy, but cool. Mostly creepy. A custom likely stolen from the Urish priestesses of Utar. All right, so they're kind of off the hook now. Korite horse races are fairly common, with the most famous and long-lived event being a multi-day race from Korava to the Blood River and back, which is about, if I recall from the map, 150. Well, round trip would be almost 400 miles, 350 miles, or something like that. Many Korites believe that running water, salt, and garlic can provide protection against most supernatural entities. A Korite child is not officially named until one full moon is passed, and only then in the presence of a shaman or chieftain. By his sixth winter, the child names his first horse. There we go. I actually read all of them. I said I was going to read a few. I keep lying. Common sayings: to sleep with a stallion, meaning to produce greatness. So these are common sayings amongst to sleep with a stallion means to produce greatness. Forget not what happened in the West. A reference to the Korite defeat by the Mulovians and Skathians. A good horse for the road and a good woman for home. Ale and wine to appease, salt and garlic to oppose. May your tent be dry, your horses well fed, and your favor be with the gods. There we go. May your tent be dry, your horses well fed, and your favor be with the gods. And that is where I shall leave you today. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Check out Savage Kingdom's role-playing game. It's in the 3rd edition. And Red Sun, if it's coming out, I'm just kind of play testing it with some friends right now. Thanks for paying attention. I'll talk to you guys again soon.